Hello. In this video, well, first off, I hope this finds you well. In this video, I want to talk about anarchism. What is anarchism? So, the idea that I had in mind before doing some more digging, some more research, was that, anarchist society would just be, chaotic. There'd be a lot of death, there'd be a lot of destruction, chaos, fighting, very Hobbesian in that way. Where Thomas Hobbes said, I think it was in the Leviathan, how human nature is nasty and brutish and evil, and if, that's what an anarchist society would be like. So that's kind of the preconceived notion that I had about what anarchism or anarchist society would look like, but that idea that I think gets perpetuated by our society, by our media, and obviously we don't get taught K through 12 what anarchism actually is, why it might be beneficial, why we should know about it, that type of stuff. So I think that's kind of the idea that's floating around in a lot of our heads when we think about anarchism. It's that masked figure, that person with like a bandana throwing, Molotov cocktails or something, is creating death and destruction, when actually that's as far from what an anarchist or anarchism is. So, my first kind of research was a video titled "What is Anarchism?" aptly, by Noam Chomsky. It's on YouTube. Just search "What is Anarchism?" Noam Chomsky, should come up. And basically, Chomsky talks about how any type of institution that has to rely on, domination, coercion, authoritarian structures, if that can't be justified, those type of institutions should be dismantled and built back up from the ground up. Okay, makes sense to me. If there's coercion, oppression, domination, authoritarian stuff going on, if that can't be justified, then get rid of it, build it back up from the bottom with people. Okay, it's awesome. Makes sense to me. Then he also talks about how there's a lot of worker co-ops in the Basque Country in Spain, and how worker co-ops are able to give the worker, the employee, more control over their time, over what they're making, as a co-op is basically a company that's ran and controlled by the workers. That makes a lot of sense too. He's also talked about how more worker co-ops are coming up in the United States in the former Rust Belt, which is cool. So, and then he talks about Rocker. I believe he was a kind of political philosopher, political thinker around anarchism and just other political thought. And Rocker said, or this is paraphrasing at least, he believed free labor from economic exploitation and political guardian gamesmanship. I think that was how he defined kind of what anarchism is: free labor from economic exploitation. And Chomsky said, that's easy to say but harder to implement, obviously. And then talks about one of the slogans of kind of anarchism or anarchy is "No God, no master." Basically saying that, we're not going to have these hierarchical, coercive, domineering structures, whether through employment, church, religion, whatever it be. If those can't be justified, we're getting rid of them. So, and then it's also, anarchism's the free development of thought and action. And anything that constrains that can't be justified, should be dismantled and built back from the ground up. Makes a lot of sense, I get it. And then, so anarchism is the planned administration of things for the good of the community. I would argue in our current kind of neoliberal plutocracy here in the United States, that's definitely not happening. There's the planned administration of things for sure, but that's not being done for the good of the community, obviously, or at least obvious to me, I would think. And yeah, so that was Chomsky on anarchism, and I believe Chomsky identifies as a anarcho-syndicalist, meaning free people to control their own lives. And I listened to a kind of audio version of a short paper that David Graeber had written, and it's titled Are You an Anarchist? That's also on YouTube. Just search Are You an Anarchist, David Graeber. It should come up. So in his little introductory paper on anarchism, he says, anarchists are simply people who believe human beings are capable of behaving in a reasonable fashion without being forced to do so. I think so. I think I would agree with that. He cites the example of just to show that we are all kind of believe in these anarchist principles, at least to a certain extent. For example, there's a long line to get on the bus. There's no police around, but you still have the decency and the thoughtfulness, the mindfulness of your other human beings to not cut in line, to wait your turn. That is acting like an anarchist. So, and then he talked about how human beings under normal circumstances can organize without being told to do how, or how to organize, I should say. And he just talks about how power corrupts. That's why we want to get rid of these hierarchical, top-down kind of domineering structures, because power ends up corrupting, and that's not a good thing. And then so anarchism is basically just the concept of common decency being followed through to its logical conclusion. And another basic premise is just the idea that people should be able to self-organize and voluntarily associate however they want. And he also talked about how, laws, police are necessary because others aren't reasonable. At least that's what we think as individuals. They aren't because other people aren't reasonable or decent, and yet those other people that we feel that way about feel the same way about us. So in reality, we would be totally, capable of functioning without these hierarchical, domineering, coercive, authoritarian structures. Because you were saying, anarchists argue all antisocial behavior is caused by systemic inequality / injustices, which are made possible by, law enforcement, prison, governments, etc., etc. It's just kind of vicious circle that keeps feeding itself. And anarchists believe that for the most part, power makes people stupid and act irresponsibly, and I think we have a lot of examples of this, throughout our history in other countries as well. And like I said earlier, anarchists really believe in voluntary association, voluntarily organizing, and then through these voluntarily organized organizations. Sorry if that got really loud for some reason. Decisions are made through a consent not imposed from the top down, so it's a not a vertical power structure. What they call that a horizontal power structure, where everybody has the same voice, the same amount of input as to what happens, which is really awesome. I totally agree with that. And then, anarchists believe that everything in society could be organized, around voluntary association, which is really cool. And then, with that said, all these top-down styles of, hierarchical domination would no longer be necessary. He talks about like the army, the government bureaucracy, large corporations, those would no longer be necessary. And then, he talks about how there's some people who seek power though their whole lives. Those are like the last people who should be in positions of power. Also talks about how our current kind of economic or political system is more likely to award people for being selfish than for actually being like a decent, good human being and extending those qualities to our fellow humans. then okay, and then contrarian might say, well, like, how would this actually happen? We need all of these top-down structures, or it's just going to be like chaotic. Well, no, actually, these are very recent, human inventions within the last, few hundred years or so for most of these things, and people have lived thousands of years before that without, having this type of top-down control being imposed on their lives. Yeah, I mean, and there's even people, groups in different places around the world that don't have these power structures in place, and they're not just killing each other left and right. So it's definitely is a possibility for sure. It also talks about how, technology hasn't been used to create really a better, more fair, equitable life for everybody. It's been used just to control and kind of oppress in some ways, instead of maybe using technology so all of us can work less, or getting rid of these, as David Graeber calls them, useless, destructive jobs, or he calls them bullshit jobs as well. So like PR, telemarketers, prison guards, etc. Get rid of all those bullshit jobs, and then be able to redistribute the rest of the work equally. And then he goes on to talk about how we teach children, all these different kind of anarchist principles in a way, like, two wrongs don't make a right, and yet we don't really follow that principle as a society or as a government. We just tell that to our kids. But if that principle was taken seriously, then we would, be ending wars, the prison industrial complex, etc. Same goes for sharing. We teach children the importance of sharing. A lot of our, society's progress, advancement, and probably other parts of the world as well, has been based on cooperation and mutual aid. All things that anarchism really believes in, the cooperation and mutual aid. He also talks about how there's no need for people to compete over basic necessities. That only serves really the people in power, because they want us to live in fear of each other. They don't want us to realize that we could go about organizing our lives, our society, in a different way that would work for everybody and not just the select few. So basically it boils down to anarchism is a society based on free association and mutual aid. Sounds pretty awesome to me. And then he asks this question: do you believe that human beings are fundamentally corrupt and evil? If no, then you believe in you're anarchist, basically. And he talks about how, every time you treat another human being with consideration and respect, you're being an anarchist. When you're working with other people and you try to seek a compromise while taking others' inputs as well, you listen to everyone, you're being an anarchist. I think those are all, principles we can get behind. At least I know I can, for sure. He also mentions, every time that an individual has the time to force somebody else to do something, but they don't, they think about, how's that going to make that person feel? Is that just? Is that right? Am I being decent? And they don't do that. They're adopting an anarchist principle. Sharing, doing anything with an eye to fairness, you're also being an anarchist. Then, he's like, well, then he, points out, like, a lot of people might say that this would be, very difficult to implement, and he does admit, adopting more of an anarchist society based around, these kind of principles of free association, mutual aid, that type of stuff could be complicated, but that doesn't mean there's no way to do it more democratically. And he says no anarchist claims to have a blueprint for a perfect society, but there are a lot of ideas out there that we could kind of start to implement and play around with. And he says that human ingenuity can solve some of these issues, as well as long as it's in the spirit of the basic principles of anarchism. And he closes just by saying that, you know, anarchism is based on principles of fundamental human decency, like I was talking about earlier, like mutual aid, like sharing, helping out, working out compromises, treating people with decency and respect and consideration. And it's a society, like I said, based on free association and mutual aid, and getting rid of these hierarchical, coercive, domineering power structures and replacing them from the ground up with more, horizontal power structures where everybody has a equal voice. So that's just a little background on what anarchism is, what anarchists believe in. Just wanted to do a little more research for myself and share that with the YouTube video. Just because I think we're at a very pivotal point in our society and our world's time, and adopting more of these anarchist, principles or viewpoints, I think could really serve us well in a lot of ways. That's why I think this is, important knowledge to get out there. So, in closing, I would love to hear your thoughts. What were your opinions or thoughts, views of anarchism, anarchists before hearing this video? Has it changed at all after hearing it? Just what are your kind of thoughts in general, or is there anything that I missed in my, definition or description of anarchism or what anarchists believe in? And let's remember to be kind to the planet, to each other, to the animals, and to ourselves. Much love. Peace. Cards.